A flight medic whispered one code word to a retired Marine general at a crowded bus terminal, and within minutes, an entire city block would be sealed off. But this story is not just about violence, courage, or the moment everything exploded. It is about the terrifying truth that real evil does not always look dangerous. Sometimes it wears a medical blanket, carries perfect paperwork, and moves through public spaces without anyone asking a single question. Imagine the kind of night when everybody is tired, half looking at their phones, just trying to get home. Fluorescent lights. Diesel in the air. A teenage boy on a gurney. 2 calm adults beside him. Nothing unusual until one exhausted nurse notices the one detail no one else sees. Stay with me, because every second of this story matters. And before we begin, like the video and comment where you're watching from. A whisper like that does not come out of nowhere. 10 minutes earlier, Megan Cross had been doing what everyone else in the terminal was doing, trying to disappear inside the noise. The station clock over the central concourse read 9:17 p.m. The overnight departures board flickered in tired blue rows. Diesel exhaust drifted in each time the outer doors opened, mixing with burnt coffee, wet concrete old fryer grease, and the stale breath of too many strangers packed beneath the same roof. A baby was crying somewhere near the vending machines. A man in a construction vest slept with his arms folded over a duffel bag. 2 college kids sat on the floor sharing earbuds and scrolling through videos with the volume too loud. A woman in scrubs leaned against a pillar with her eyes closed and her lunch cooler at her feet. It was one of those places built for movement but clogged with delay, where nobody wanted to make eye contact because eye contact made people real. And real people came with stories, and stories came with weight. Megan had enough weight of her own. She sat beneath a glowing ad for personal injury lawyers with her backpack by one boot and a paper cup warming her palm. The coffee had gone bitter and thin an hour earlier, but she kept drinking it anyway because the act of holding something warm felt like medicine. Her dark hair was pinned back in a loose knot that had mostly given up. There was a faint red crease across the bridge of her nose from the respirator she had worn through the last half of her shift. Her left shoulder ached where she had caught a falling patient in the trauma bay that afternoon. Her right knee throbbed every time she bent it. She had been awake for close to 20 hours, and the human part of her wanted silence, a bed, and 6 consecutive hours with nobody coding, bleeding, seizing, screaming, or begging. Instead, she was in the Phoenix downtown bus terminal, waiting on a delayed shuttle that was supposed to take her north to Prescott for one rare weekend off. At 38, Megan was the sort of exhausted that had become structural. It no longer sat on top of her. It had sunk into her bones years ago and made a home there. Before Phoenix General, there had been 11 years as an Air Force flight medic. Dust-blown medevacs, burn wards, tarmac transfers in August heat that felt hot enough to strip skin. Long nights inside cargo aircraft with the smell of blood and hydraulic fluid braided together in the recycled air. She had learned medicine in motion, in noise and turbulence, in darkness, with one gloved hand on an airway bag and the other bracing against a metal wall while the aircraft pitched through storm cells. That kind of training changed the way a person looked at the world. It taught you that the body told the truth long before people did. It taught you that equipment had language. It taught you that fear had patterns. Most of all, it taught you that something could be deeply, catastrophically wrong while still appearing almost ordinary to everyone else in the room. Megan lowered the cup from her mouth when the side door slid open and a private transport gurney came through. She did not look twice because a gurney in a transit hub was unusual. She looked twice because the gurney moved wrong. Not the wheels, the pace. The man, steering from the head, moved with the measured care of someone who wanted to be seen as careful. Not someone who had spent the last hour fighting for a sick kid. Not someone distracted by fear. His hands were placed too clean, too controlled. He wore pressed chinos, loafers, and a slate blue windbreaker over a white dress shirt with the collar open at the throat. He was in his mid-40s, handsome in a severe way, Clean jaw, close-cut hair flecked with silver at the temples. A gold wedding band flashed on one hand. Expensive watch, no tie. The kind of man who could pass for finance, medicine, law, politics, or private wealth depending on the room. Beside the gurney walked a woman in a camel-colored coat with a silk scarf looped neatly at her neck. Early 40s. Blonde hair cut to her shoulders. Minimal jewelry, tasteful and costly. She carried a leather tote that looked too structured for a hospital family bag and too light to hold anything a parent with a medically fragile child would actually need. No blankets folded over her arm, no medications in hand, no look of frantic vigilance, just composed concern shaped for public viewing. On the gurney lay a teenage boy under a navy thermal blanket. Oxygen mask on, neck pillow at one side, a lightweight monitor clipped to the rail, a transport bag hanging beneath. The whole arrangement had the silhouette of legitimate care. That was the problem. It had the silhouette. Megan watched them angle toward Gate 12, the line reserved for medical priority boarding on interstate routes. There was a driver in a station vest already waiting there with a clipboard. He looked impatient, not alarmed. The kind of impatience that came from paperwork delays, not emergencies. She took another sip of coffee and kept watching. You could not work trauma as long as she had without developing rules. Private ones. Quiet ones. Rules that had nothing to do with policy manuals and everything to do with survival. Rule 1 was simple. Anything that wanted to be believed too quickly deserved a second look. The woman leaned over the boy and adjusted the edge of the blanket around his shoulder. The gesture looked tender from a distance. Up close, even from 3 rows away, something in it felt rehearsed. Her fingers touched skin for less than a second. Her smile was directed outward toward the terminal, toward the station employee, toward anyone who might be glancing their way. Parents of sick kids did not perform concern. They forgot the audience existed. The man stopped the gurney beside a row of seats and crouched as if checking a brake lock. His eyes swept the terminal. Not once, repeatedly. Entrances, exits, security cameras, uniforms. Then back to the boy. Then to the woman. Then to the route ahead. Megan set the cup beside her boot. Something cold stirred low in her stomach. She told herself it could still be nothing. A husband under stress. A wife holding herself together. A kid heavily medicated for transport. A private transfer arranged in a hurry. 100 benign explanations. Then the boy's hand slid out from under the blanket. It happened for only a breath. A pale hand, 2 loose fingers, half-curled knuckles waxy under the fluorescent light. Megan's focus sharpened instantly. Nail beds, blue. Not dramatic. Not cartoon blue. Subtle cyanosis at the tips, the kind you missed if you were not looking for it. But once she saw it, she could not unsee it. The woman tucked the hand back under the blanket almost immediately, her expression never changing. Megan rose to her feet and slung her backpack over one shoulder. She moved toward the vending machines along the wall, taking a path that would bring her within 15 feet of the gurney without making a straight line for it. Her face stayed neutral. Tired traveler, no urgency, no stare. As she approached, the monitor on the rail came into focus. A portable pulse oximeter module. Clip line visible. Display dark. Not dim, not sleeping. Megan's jaw tightened. She let her eyes travel lower as if just passing by. The oxygen cylinder nested beneath the gurney frame. Regulator attached. Mask tubing looped up toward the boy's face. From a distance it looked fine. Close enough to read the valve, she saw the truth. Closed. No flow. The tubing itself lay too flat. No condensation, no movement. Her pulse kicked once hard enough to make her ears ring. She stepped to the vending machine and pretended to study the options while watching their reflection in the black front glass. The boy could have been 16, maybe 17. Athletic shoulders beneath sedation slackness. Dark hair damp at the temples. Face half obscured by the oxygen mask and blanket edge. Too still. That was the thing that bothered her most. Not peaceful. Not exhausted. Still in the wrong way. the body of a person chemically pressed beneath consciousness instead of resting inside it. The woman stroked the boy's hairline. "You are doing great, baby," she said softly. Her voice was wrong, too, not because of what it said, because of what it did not carry. No fear, no grief, no strain from hours spent in emergency waiting rooms, no private tenderness. It sounded like a woman reading the right line in front of witnesses. The man straightened from the gurney and offered a grateful smile to the station employee. "We appreciate your help. His episodes can get worse if we keep him upright too long." The employee nodded in sympathetic discomfort, eager to be useful, eager to move them through. "Of course, sir. We will get you on before general boarding." Megan pressed a coin into the vending machine she did not intend to use. The machine swallowed it and flashed exact change only. She barely saw it. The boy shifted under the blanket with the faintest involuntary jerk. Not a comfortable adjustment. More like his nervous system trying to claw upward through mud. His head rolled to one side, and for a second his face turned just enough that she could see one eye. Open, not fully. A slit of brown under heavy lids, and inside it, beneath the chemical drag, a focused point of terror. He was not lost. He was trapped in there. Megan's mouth went dry. Then she saw the wrist. The blanket had ridden back half an inch where the strap of the rail held the fabric in place. Just enough exposed skin. Just enough light. A pressure groove ringed the left wrist. No, not a pressure groove. Multiple. Fine parallel indentations with bruising beneath them. Zip tie marks. Fresh. Megan looked away before her own face could react. Noise returned all at once. Rolling luggage. Public announcements. The hiss of doors. A child laughing somewhere far off. Her own heartbeat pounding against cartilage. She bought a bottle of water she did not want and walked away from the machine at a measured pace because running would get someone killed. At the far end of the concourse, she stopped beside a concrete planter filled with dust-filmed snake plants and unscrewed the cap with hands that had begun to tremble. She had seen trafficking victims before. Not many, enough to know that most people kept looking for the wrong image. They expected chains and bruises like movies. They expected panic, loudness, visible struggle. Real control was usually quieter. A hand on the elbow that lingered a beat too long. A person who answered for someone else too quickly. Paperwork that arrived before questions did. Sedation, shame, eye contact that asked for help and then vanished the instant a handler looked over. Her first year at Phoenix General, a girl of 19 had come in with abdominal pain and a man who spoke for her with polished gentleness. He had called her sweetheart 17 times in 4 minutes. Megan had noticed the girl flinch each time his fingers touched the back of her neck. Later, once they separated them for a scan, the girl had broken down hard enough to vomit before she managed to say she had not been allowed to sleep alone in 9 months. Megan had never forgotten that. Bodies remembered captivity even when mouths stayed shut. She looked back toward Gate 12. The man was signing something on a clipboard now. The woman had shifted to the side of the gurney, placing herself between the boy and the rest of the room in a way that could be read as protective by anyone who wanted the easy version of events. Megan scanned for station police. 2 uniformed security officers stood near the food court on the opposite side of the terminal dealing with a shouting man whose backpack had been flagged at entry. Too far. Distracted. Even if she got to them immediately, they would do exactly what most systems did first. They would ask for documentation. And if the people at the gurney had made it this far, they had documentation. She blew out a slow breath and forced herself to think in sequence. What did she know, not feel know? The monitor was dead. The oxygen was not running. The patient had cyanosis at the nail beds. The patient showed signs of chemical suppression. The left wrist carried probable restraint marks. The escorts displayed watchfulness without authentic distress. The woman performed maternal comfort rather than inhabiting it. The man tracked the room instead of the patient. It was enough to act. It was not enough to guarantee anyone would believe her in time. She needed someone who could read the scene faster than policy would. That was when she noticed the older man under the departure board. He sat alone beneath a panel advertising discounted routes to New Mexico and Nevada, a hardback book open in his lap. 60s, maybe early 70s. Broad, through the chest even, seated gray hair cut short, weathered face, square jaw, softened only slightly by age. He wore a field jacket over a dark button front shirt and tan slacks. One boot crossed lightly over the other. To most people, he would have registered as one more veteran traveling alone, maybe headed to visit family. Maybe too disciplined to slouch even in retirement. But posture spoke louder than clothing. Everyone else in the terminal sagged with waiting. He occupied stillness like a trained position. His eyes stayed on the page, yet his awareness extended beyond it. Megan saw it in the tiny shifts, a reflection in the glass. A shoulder angle changing after the station doors opened. The way he registered movement without the hungry scanning civilians mistook for vigilance. He was not nervous. He was calibrated. Then he turned a page and light caught the ring on his right hand. Marine Corps, old gold-heavy crest worn smooth at the edges. Megan felt a flash of memory from years earlier. A military reception outside San Antonio, rows of officers in dress uniforms. Too much brass and whiskey. A colonel once telling a room full of medics that you could always spot a career Marine by how he stood, even when nobody was watching. The man beneath the board stood exactly like that. She looked closer. There was a scar running from his left ear down into the collar line. Almost invisible, unless you knew how to see healed trauma. Another at the base of the thumb. One knuckle enlarged from an old break. Not ornamental wounds. Working wounds. A station announcement crackled overhead. Attention, passengers for Route 608 to Albuquerque. Medical priority and assisted boarding will begin at Gate 12 in approximately 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Megan's mind moved. She could go to security first and risk losing the window. She could confront the escorts and risk them forcing movement or violence. She could call 911 and wait in a building built for people to vanish through in less than 2 minutes. Or she could trust the reading she had made of one stranger. That was a dangerous choice. Dangerous, but not irrational. People who spent time around violence learned to recognize two types of authority. The kind given by institutions and the kind grown slowly in the nervous system. The first one had badges, job titles, desks. The second one had timing, economy, consequence. The man under the board looked like the second kind. Megan wiped her palms against her jeans and started walking. Halfway there, the woman by the gurney glanced across the concourse and for a second her eyes swept straight past Megan. Cool, pale, assessing. Not casual. Megan kept moving, slowing to let a family with rolling suitcases cut between them. She dipped her head like any tired traveler yielding space and felt the woman's attention move off again. By the time she reached the bench under the board, the man had not looked up once. Up close, he looked even less accidental. The book in his lap was a history of Fallujah heavily annotated with tabs. The hand resting on the spine was broad and veined, still powerful. His face, carved by age and sun, held none of the restless softness of ordinary retirement. There was a quiet violence in him, not active, not searching, simply present like a weapon locked in a drawer. Megan did not speak immediately. Her training stopped her. Approach without startling. Control your breathing. Use clear language. Lead with facts. She crouched as if adjusting the lace of her boot and kept her gaze on the floor. There is a teenage boy on a private gurney at Gate 12, she said softly. Oxygen is off. Monitor is dead. He has fresh restraint marks. The adults with him are wrong. The man turned one page. Nothing else. Megan pressed on. I am an ER nurse. Former flight medic. I know the difference between sedation and collapse. He is not being transported. He is being controlled. Still, no visible reaction. From 30 feet away, no one would have seen anything but a woman pausing near a stranger's bench before moving on. Security will ask for papers, she said. These people have papers. At that, the man lifted his eyes from the book. They were a pale, washed gray, the kind that revealed nothing until they decided to. Megan felt the impact of being fully seen by someone trained to strip noise out of a room. "How certain are you?" he asked, "that the kid is conscious enough to know he needs help?" "Certain." "What did you see?" "Cyanosis at the nail beds, chemically depressed respirations, fake oxygen setup, dead pulse ox, zip tie impressions on the wrist." He made eye contact. She swallowed. He knew. The man closed the book over one finger, holding his place. "You alone?" "Yes." "Anyone else made them?" "Not yet." A beat passed between them, small and dense. He studied her face, probably reading exhaustion, adrenaline, credibility, fear. Then he asked military. Air Force, medical evacuation for 11 years. Now something shifted, slight but real. Name: Megan Cross. He nodded once. Thomas Vale. The name landed a moment late. Megan stared, not because she needed the confirmation, because now that he had said it, she could place the face completely. Retired Marine General. Decorated. Public enough to be recognizable, private enough that seeing him here in a bus terminal felt surreal. She remembered a magazine cover from years back, a profile about strategic command and desert deployments, and the cost of sending young men into impossible places. His hair had been darker then. The eyes had not changed. "General Vale," she said before she could stop herself. "Not here." He set the book aside with deliberate calm and rose in one smooth motion. He was taller than she expected. Not imposing because of size alone, though there was that too. Imposing because everything in him aligned toward use. Even age had not softened the geometry of him. "Listen carefully," he said in a voice pitched for her alone. "Do not point, do not run, do not give them a reason to move faster. Where is the nearest security post with a direct line to city police? East corridor near the food court. Too far to help in time if they are already boarding." He looked past her without moving his head. "Describe the male. 40s, clean cut, strong build, good clothes, scans exits constantly, hands too controlled, not medical, could be armed." The female. 40s, blonde, composed, performing concern, large tote, could be carrying medication or a weapon. Vale glanced once toward the floor-to-ceiling window beside them, using reflection rather than a direct turn. Megan followed the line and saw the fake family small in the glass behind him. Kid's approximate weight: 130, maybe 140. Likely drug class: opioid or benzodiazepine, maybe both. He is suppressed enough to pass as docile but not deeply intubated or fully out. Vale let out a slow breath through his nose. Megan could almost feel his mind reordering the room. Passengers, sightlines, distance to gate 12, available cover, civilian density, probability of weapon, probability of panic. "You were right not to challenge them alone," he said. "I almost did. Glad you did not." Megan looked past him again. The station employee at gate 12 had unhooked the stanchion rope. Boarding would begin any second. Once the gurney moved into the secured lane, everything became tighter, narrower, riskier. Her throat tightened. If they get him onto that bus and transfer again outside the city, he disappears. Vale's gaze stayed on the reflection. Maybe. The word landed harder than reassurance would have. Maybe meant possible. Maybe meant not guaranteed. Maybe meant act now. Megan forced herself to stay steady. "What do you need from me?" He looked at her, then direct and level. "Yes, it is." She nodded once and turned toward the east corridor, forcing herself into a brisk walk that did not quite become a run. As she crossed the concourse, she could feel the scene tightening around her. The ordinary terminal sounds had not changed, but her body heard them differently now. Every rolling suitcase sounded farther away. Every overhead announcement came through a layer of cotton. Her senses had narrowed to motion timing threat. She reached the security post beside the food court, where the 2 station officers had just finished with the shouting man. One was thick through the middle late 50s, sweat darkening his collar. The other was younger, sharper, more alert, but watching his supervisor before he decided how serious to be. Megan showed them her hospital badge first because uniforms spoke to uniforms even when the uniforms were gone. My name is Megan Cross. I am an ER nurse at Phoenix General. There is a teenage male at Gate 12 on a private gurney. His escort paperwork may be fraudulent. His equipment is non-functional. He appears chemically sedated and physically restrained. The older officer frowned, as if she had handed him a tax form in the wrong line. Private medical transfer. That is the cover they are using. His expression cooled. Ma'am, what exactly did you observe? She gave it to him clean. Fast, clinical, no wasted words. Closed oxygen valve. Inactive pulse monitor. Cyanosis. Probable restraint marks on left wrist. Unresponsive, but not medically managed. The male escort is scanning the room like security, not family. The younger officer glanced toward Gate 12. The older one did not move. Did the patient verbally ask for help? He is sedated. So no. He made eye contact and tracked. He is aware. The older officer exhaled through his nose. Do you know these people? Number. Then right now you are making a serious accusation based on visual impressions, based on medical assessment, without touching the patient. Yes. He held out a hand as if slowing traffic. Ma'am, dispatch flagged a private transfer packet 20 minutes ago. State transport authorization. Medical waiver. Confirmed boarding accommodation. Megan leaned closer across the desk. Then your flagged packet is dirty. The younger officer's eyes sharpened at that. The older one stiffened. Watch your tone. You need to look at that boy before he leaves this building. Ma'am, he is being moved under sedation. Ma'am, he has restraint marks. Enough. The word cracked harder than he probably intended, and several heads in the food court turned. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should at least lay eyes on the transport. The older officer cut him a look. You want to jam a cleared medical departure because a traveler feels uneasy. Megan's exhaustion evaporated into anger so cold it clarified her. I want you to do your job. Silence. The older officer's mouth flattened. His pride got there before his judgment. You will return to your seat and let transit procedures handle transit procedures. Megan stared at him for one stunned second, then another. At the edge of her hearing, the terminal voice announced final pre-boarding clearance for Route 608. Gate 12 had started moving. She turned away before rage could cost time. Back in the center aisle, Thomas Vale stood where she had left him, no longer seated, the old Marine history tucked under one arm. He did not ask what security said. One look at her face told him enough. The gurney was already rolling toward the open lane. The woman in the camel coat kept one hand on the blanket. The man guiding the rail had picked up speed. Megan stopped beside Vale and fought to keep her breathing even. They cleared the paperwork, she said. I assumed they had. They are not coming. Vale looked once toward the gate, once toward the reflection in the window, and then handed her his book. The hardback was heavier than she expected. Hold this, he said quietly. Megan took it. General. He was already moving. Not fast, not hesitant. Just forward with the kind of calm that made space shift around him. And for the first time that night, the people at Gate 12 began to notice that someone was walking toward them who did not intend to step aside. Someone was walking toward them who did not intend to step aside. The first person to register it was not the station attendant. It was the man at the gurney. He saw Vale coming through the reflection in the glass doors beside the gate, and the change in him was almost microscopic. His chin lifted half an inch. His pace slowed without stopping. His right hand settled more firmly on the rail. A man who had spent his life controlling rooms did not like variables he had not chosen, and Thomas Vale looked exactly like that kind of variable. Megan stayed where she was, one aisle back from the medical boarding lane, the book heavy in her hands, her pulse striking hard against the inside of her throat. She could feel how thin the margin had become. Ordinary noise still filled the terminal, but it felt fragile now, like surface tension before something tore through it. The station employee at Gate 12 was a young woman with dark hair pinned back in a neat clip and a navy transit vest over a white blouse. Her badge read Lila Ortiz. She had a handheld scanner in one hand and a clipboard balanced against her hip. She looked up at the older man approaching and gave him the strained customer service smile of someone who had already worked too many late shifts. Sir Boarding is on the other side of the stanchion. Vale stopped just short of the opening. I know. His voice was low, almost soft. Not aggressive. Not theatrical. That made people listen harder. Lila blinked. If you need assistance, I can help you in 1 second. I need to get these passengers onto the coach. Vale's eyes moved past her to the gurney, to the boy beneath the blanket, to the oxygen cylinder under the frame, to the man gripping the rail. No, he said, you need to stop. The sentence landed flat and heavy. The man at the gurney gave a brief, incredulous smile, the kind wealthy, composed men often used when they intended to recast conflict as misunderstanding. I am sorry, he said. Do I know you? Number. Then I suggest you move. Vale did not. From where she stood, Megan could see people nearby beginning to tune in. Not all at once. One by one, a man in a baseball cap looking up from his phone. An older couple halfway through opening sandwiches from a paper bag. A college student sliding one earbud out. Public places did not become crowds all at once. They became clusters of attention first. The woman in the camel coat stepped closer to the gurney's side, placing her body in a protective angle that would have looked maternal to anyone who had not studied performance under stress. Is there a problem? She asked. Vale kept his gaze on the man. There is now. The man's smile thinned. Leela glanced between them, uncertainty creeping into her posture. Sir, these are medical priority passengers. They are cleared for assisted boarding. Vale turned his head slightly toward her without taking his eyes fully off the escorts. Based on what? She frowned. I am sorry. Based on what did you clear them? She straightened. The customer service tone dropped into process language. Private transport, packet station authorization, route transfer approval, and medical accommodation documentation. Did you inspect the patient yourself? That is not my role, sir. Did anyone here inspect the patient? Lila hesitated just long enough to answer the question before she spoke. They were processed through security on arrival. Megan felt the bitter shape of that sentence settle into place. Process through security. Hand off to transit. Transit assumes medicine. Medicine never saw the patient. Everyone touching the paper. No one touching the truth. The man at the gurney shifted his weight forward half a step. My son is not well. He does not need a public spectacle. If you have an issue with procedure, take it up with station management after we depart. The word son was clean, easy, perfectly paced. Vale looked at the boy for the first time long enough that it could not be mistaken for casual interest. The teenager's head rested at an angle that would have compromised anyone truly struggling to breathe. The mask sat over nose and mouth with no visible condensation inside. His chest rose, but too slowly, too shallowly. Your son, Vale repeated. Yes. How old is he? The man did not miss a beat. 17. What is his diagnosis? That landed. It should not have not if the story were lived rather than memorized. A father transporting a medically fragile child did not need to consult memory for the illness that had built his life. Yet the smallest pause opened in the man's face before he answered. Complicated seizure disorder. Megan watched Vale hear it, not react. Hear it. Complicated, Vale said. That your term or his physician's? The woman answered this time too quickly. He has multiple neurological issues. We do not owe strangers his chart. A better move. Anger instead of detail. Moral outrage instead of specificity. People often backed away from medical privacy language because they feared appearing cruel. Vale did not move. Then answer this, he said. Why is the oxygen closed? Lila looked down. The man's expression did not change. Portable conservation. He is between cycles. He is cyanotic at the nail beds. The woman's voice sharpened. Who are you? A citizen with eyes. Megan saw the male escort mark that sentence and store it. Not dismiss it. Store it. Men who used violence for work often revealed themselves in tiny accounting measures. He was already recalculating the old man in front of him, testing posture, balance, confidence, possible training, looking for the edges of the problem. Lila bent instinctively at the waist and glanced at the oxygen cylinder under the frame. The valve was right there, closed, unmistakably closed. Her face changed. The man saw that too. "Do not touch that," he said to her in a tone so clipped and controlled it came out closer to a command than a request. That was the first genuine thing he had done. Lila froze with her hand half lifted. Megan started forward before she realized she had moved. Vale heard it in her shoes on the tile and spoke without turning. "Stay where you are, Miss Cross." The use of her name hit the air like a formal declaration. The nearest people heard it. So did the man with the gurney. His gaze flicked past Vale and found Megan at once. Recognition sharpened his whole face. She was not just some random traveler anymore. She was the source. For one brief second, his mask dropped enough for her to see it. Not panic, hatred, precise and cold. Then it was gone. "You," he said softly. The woman turned and looked straight at Megan. A different kind of hatred there. Cleaner, more offended. As if the real crime in this scene was that someone ordinary had interfered. Megan planted her feet and made herself answer in an even tone. "Your patient is not receiving oxygen." The woman laughed, once a brittle sound with no humor in it. "Our son has been stable for hours. You have been harassing us since the concourse. I have not spoken to you until now." Lila looked at Megan. "You know them?" "Number." The man raised one hand in a display of wounded composure. "This woman has been staring at us and making assumptions because my boy is sedated for travel. We have clearances. We have documentation. We are late because of this already." He angled his body just enough to include the bystanders now paying attention, inviting them into the role of reasonable witnesses. Megan hated how effective the performance was. A tired mother nearby tightened her hold on her toddler and frowned at Megan as if trying to decide whether concern had become cruelty. An older man in a veteran's cap squinted at the gurney, uncertain. Lila's face flickered between alarm and embarrassment. Public conflict made most people grab the nearest narrative that let them stop thinking. Sick kid, stressed parents, overreacting stranger, it was easy. It asked nothing of them. Vale did not allow the easy narrative room to settle. He stepped once to the left and put himself directly in front of the stanchion opening. Not broad, not dramatic, final. "If this boy is medically fragile," he said, "then a proper evaluation protects him. If he is not, then you are transporting a sedated minor under false pretenses. Either way, he does not board." The man's jaw locked. Sir Lila said, trying to retrieve authority now that it was slipping away, "I need you to step aside while I contact my supervisor." "Do that," Vale said, "now." He still had not raised his voice. That somehow made her obey faster. She lifted the radio clipped at her shoulder with shaking fingers. "Control, this is Gate 12. I need a supervisor and security response for a boarding dispute involving a medical transfer. Please advise." Across the concourse, heads turned. The man at the gurney gave a long exhale through his nose, as if fighting for patience. "This is absurd." He reached into the inner pocket of his windbreaker with slow, deliberate motion. Megan's entire body went rigid. Vale's weight shifted almost invisibly onto the balls of his feet. But the man only drew out a slim leather document wallet and flipped it open toward Lila. "Here," he said. "Since everyone seems confused." Lila stared at the credentials and travel packet visible behind the clear inserts. She took them with both hands, grateful for something procedural to hold on to. Her eyes moved left to right over the pages. Signatures, letterhead, stamped approvals, a route transfer form, a medical exception notice, a private guardian authorization. Megan could not read the print from where she stood, but she did not need to. The man's calm had returned too smoothly. He believed in those papers. or believed in what they would do to weaker minds. Lila swallowed. These appear in order. Of course they do, he said. Because my family has done nothing wrong. He looked at Vale when he said family, not Lila. Vale extended a hand. Let me see them. The man's eyes narrowed. Absolutely not. That again was too sharp. Not the refusal itself. The energy under it. A father under stress might refuse out of fear, anger, privacy. This was different. Territorial. Defensive over the documents themselves. Lila held the wallet close to her chest, unsure who it belonged to now. Megan stepped forward one more pace, keeping her hands visible. Look at the boy, not the paperwork. The woman swung toward her, voice suddenly cracking like a whip. Stop saying boy as if he is evidence. He is my child. Then tell me his name. The terminal seemed to inhale. The woman blinked. Only once, but it was enough. She recovered quickly. Noah. Megan felt the answer move through her. It hit something wrong. Not because Noah could not be true, because the woman had reached for it instead of living in it. Vale heard the same fracture. What hospital stabilized him, he asked. The man answered, Flagstaff Medical. What physician signed his transfer? Dr. Keller. What medication is suppressing his respirations? This time silence arrived clean and full. The woman looked at the man. The man did not look at her. Lila lowered the document wallet half an inch. Megan stepped to the side until she had a clearer view of the gurney. The boy's face remained half hidden by the mask, but his lashes fluttered once. Then again. His body was trying to break surface and failing. Under the blanket, one foot gave a weak, involuntary push against the frame. He was still in there. The man saw Megan looking and moved at once, placing his body between her and the gurney. The motion was controlled, but control had edges now. He was no longer acting for the room. He was reacting to threat. Vale's voice dropped another degree. Step away from the patient. The man did not. Or what? The question came out quiet. Dangerous. Meant only for Vale, though everyone nearby heard it. Megan saw Lila's throat bob. She lifted her radio again. Control, I need that response now. The reply crackled back through static. Supervisor en route. Security tied up East Hall. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. In a room full of civilians, 2 minutes could become a lifetime if someone decided to shorten the distance between intention and action. Vale's expression did not change. You are standing in the path of a medical assessment. I am standing with my son. No, Megan said before she could stop herself. You are standing between him and help. The man turned his head and looked at her fully. He had handsome features. That made the emptiness in them worse. The absence of ordinary human friction was suddenly visible now that the social glaze had cracked. No fear for the boy, no strain, no confusion. Just calculation under pressure. You should have minded your own business, he said. Lila looked from one face to another, and some part of her finally understood that the scene she had been trying to process as customer conflict had shifted into something else. Sir, she said, voice unsteady, I need you to lower your tone and move the gurney back from the lane. The woman touched the boy's shoulder. Please, she said. But now the plea was directed outward, wider, desperate in a different register. Please, he cannot miss this transfer. Why, Vale asked. She stared at him. Why cannot he miss it? Our receiving team is waiting. Where? Albuquerque. Name the facility. Her mouth parted. Nothing came out. Megan felt the last pieces click. Not because she needed more proof for herself, because now the people around them could hear the hollowness too. A man with a soft-sided cooler bag paused beside a row of seats and frowned openly. The older couple with the sandwiches had stopped eating. One of the college kids was filming from hip level, trying not to be obvious. The woman saw the crowd changing and her entire body tightened. The man's right hand left the rail for the first time and dropped to his side. That was subtle, important. Vale's gaze dipped there for a fraction of a second and came back. Megan knew that look from trauma bays, from helicopter pads, from the half-second before combative patients threw punches or relatives reached for hidden weapons. Certain motions carried intent before they carried action. The man noticed Vale notice. Now both of them were done pretending. Leela took an involuntary step back from the gate opening. "I am asking everyone to remain calm." No one listened. A transit supervisor appeared at the far end of the corridor, moving fast, with a red tie askew and a radio in one hand. He was thick-set, breathless, annoyed before he understood the problem. "What is going on here?" Lila turned toward him with immediate relief. "Mr. Benson, this gentleman is blocking a medical boarding and claims there is an issue with the transfer." Benson looked at Vale first because Vale was the obstacle in a suit built for command even out of uniform. "Sir, you cannot obstruct boarding," Vale said. "This transfer is fraudulent. The patient is sedated without active respiratory support. The escorts cannot identify the receiving facility or medication profile. Secure the boy and call city police." Benson stared. On whose authority? That question always came. Megan could almost have spoken it with him. Vale reached into the inner breast of his field jacket. This time the motion pulled everyone's attention. Even the man at the gurney leaned slightly, reading hand speed angle concealment. Megan felt the tension spike so hard it was almost a physical thing pressing at her ribs. Vale withdrew a leather card case and flipped it open. From where she stood, Megan saw only a flash of old credentials and a photograph. Benson stepped closer, looked, and his whole face changed with the confused alarm of a man who had expected some irate civilian and found himself staring into a level of authority he did not know how to ignore. "General," he said before he could stop himself. The man at the gurney heard that. So did half the people near the gate. He covered the reaction well, but not entirely. The word had changed the equation, not because an old title carried legal power here, because men like him survived by reading risk quickly, and a retired general choosing to intervene in public was not random noise. Vale snapped the case shut and put it away. This is now a public safety matter. Benson licked dry lips. "I still need transit police before I can detain anyone." "Then do not call it detention," Vale said. "Call it delay. Pull the lane rope. Move the bus." Benson hesitated. In that hesitation, the man at the gurney made his decision. Megan saw it first in the shoulders. Everything above his waist settled. Not relaxed. Locked. The kind of stillness that arrived when someone had committed internally and was only waiting for the right opening to externalize it. He smiled again, but it had become a bare technical thing. "This is a disgrace," he said loudly enough for the bystanders. "My son has a life-threatening condition, and now he is being held by a paranoid nurse and a retired soldier playing cop in a bus station." He shifted his grip on the rail. "Leela, give me my documents." Lila did not move. "Now." She flinched. Benson extended a hand toward her. "Let me see the packet." The man's voice sharpened. "No, you have seen enough." That one sentence told on him more than anything else had. Process-minded people loved process when it benefited them. Only cornered people tried to close the loop. Benson heard it too. "Sir, if there is no problem, hand over the packet." The woman stepped in. "This is humiliating. He is sedated because travel triggers seizures. Do you want him convulsing on your floor? Is that what this is?" Megan kept her eyes on the boy. The blanket shifted weakly. One hand slid out again, fingers brushing the edge of the rail. For a second, the index finger curled once, twice against the metal. Not random, not a seizure movement. Deliberate enough to make her breath catch. He was trying. She took one step forward. "His pulse ox clip is not attached," she said. "The cable is hanging loose." Everyone looked. The clip, tucked half beneath the blanket near the boy's wrist, dangled free. No finger inside. No reading possible. Leela made a small sound. Benson stared. The woman moved to cover it, but now even that looked like concealment. Vale used the opening with ruthless precision. "If this is a lawful medical transfer," he said, voice carrying clean through the concourse, "then no one here should object to a paramedic touching the patient for 10 seconds. The silence that followed was the kind that changed social weather. It gave bystanders time to compare competing stories and feel one of them harden. A man near the vending machine said, "Why is the oxygen off?" Someone else unseen answered, "Yeah." The crowd had not turned fully. Crowds rarely did. But doubt had entered. Once doubt entered, masks had to work harder to hold. The male escort's eyes moved once fast across the people watching, counting witnesses, distances. Whether fear in the room was still manageable. Megan saw another change in him then, tiny but unmistakable. His right elbow drew inward against his ribs, as if protecting something under the jacket. Weapon side. Her mouth went dry. Vale saw it too. No one spoke for 3 full seconds. Then the radio on Benson's belt crackled to life with useless delay. Transit to Gate 12. Security units rerouting from East Hall. ETA 1 minute. 1 minute. The man looked at the lane behind Vale, at the people to either side, at Benson, at Lila, still holding the packet, at Megan, and finally at the boy on the gurney. There was no tenderness in that look, only ownership. The woman saw the same calculation unfolding and went very still, every trace of public distress wiped clean. In its place sat cold readiness. Whatever role she had been playing was gone now. She did not need the crowd to believe in her anymore. She needed only to survive the next movement. Megan felt it and knew with a certainty beyond words that the room had crossed out of confusion and into danger. Vale shifted 1 foot forward into the lane. A small movement, enough to close the path completely. "Step away from the gurney," he said. The man's eyes narrowed. "Move. Number." The word rang harder this time, not louder but denser, the old field command finally surfacing beneath the civilian tone. The man released the rail with his left hand and raised both palms, chest high, in a show of surrender so polished it might have worked on anyone less experienced. "You want calm," he said. "Fine. Let us all calm down." His voice had gone smooth again. Too smooth. Megan heard her own heartbeat. Benson took 1 uncertain step backward. Lila clutched the document wallet so tightly the plastic inserts bent. The woman in camel wool slid her leather tote from shoulder to forearm, not dropping it, positioning it. Vale's gaze flicked once to the bag, once to the man's right side, then back to the eyes. He knew there might be more than one threat. So did Megan. The boy on the gurney made a sound then, barely more than air through a dry throat. But real. Every head turned. Megan moved without asking permission and came up along the left side of the lane until she could see his face clearly for the first time. Young. Drugged. Sweat damp on the temples, lips pale under the mask. One eye cracked open, glassy but tracking. He looked at her, straight at her. There was pleading in it. But there was something else, too. Urgency. Not save me. Now. His respirations are dropping, Megan said. That was true. They had slowed again, each breath farther apart than the last. If he had been dosed for docility, time was now working against everyone. She reached for the mask. The man moved, instantly blocking her with a forearm. "Do not touch him." Megan recoiled half a step on instinct. Vale did not move at all, but the temperature in his voice dropped to ice. "Take your arm off her." The man smiled without warmth. Or what? Megan had seen that exact moment before in very different places. In parking lots outside trauma centers. In drunk domestic scenes with patrol lights flashing red against stucco walls. In military wards when unstable men mistook restraint for negotiation. The air did not explode all at once. It compressed. People became too still. Choices narrowed. Everyone with training began to count hands. The right hand matters first, she thought. The bag matters second. The boy matters most. She shifted her stance the way old instructors had burned into muscle memory years ago, not to fight, never to fight, but to keep her weight under her if chaos took the floor out from under the room. Across the concourse, a child started crying because children often knew before adults that something terrible was near. Security still had not arrived. Benson swallowed audibly. "Sir," he said to the man at the gurney, "I need you to take 1 step back from the patient." A lie in the sentence. He was the one standing too close to danger, and some part of him knew it. The man ignored him. His attention had narrowed entirely to Vale now. 2 predators reading range. 2 very different kinds of experience weighing each other across 6 feet of fluorescent tile. Vale spoke first. You have one clean path left. Step away from the boy and place your hands where everyone can see them." The man's eyes never blinked. "You are not in command here," Novale said. "But you are finished pretending." The sentence landed like a blade slipped between ribs. Something in the man's face emptied out. No indignation left. No fatherhood, no civilized irritation. Just work. Megan saw his right shoulder tighten. At the same instant, the woman's hand disappeared into the leather tote, and the terminal finally understood it had been standing in the mouth of a trap. The man moved first. Not fast enough for panic. Fast enough for training. His right hand knifed inside the windbreaker not with the fumbling urgency of an amateur, but with a clean practiced line that had one purpose and one purpose only. He was not reaching for paperwork. He was not reaching for a phone. He was going for steel. Thomas Vale closed the distance in a single step. He did not lunge. He entered. His left hand snapped down on the man's wrist before the pistol could clear cloth. His thumb crushing the tendons at the base of the hand, while his other palm drove hard into the man's upper chest. The move turned the draw inward and down, redirecting the weapon toward the tile. The shot cracked like a bomb in the enclosed terminal. Glass blew out of the advertising panel beside Gate 12. Lila screamed and dropped the document wallet. Benson stumbled backward into the stanchion rope. Somewhere in the concourse a woman shrieked, and then every held breath in the building broke at once. People hit the floor. Phone chargers, coffee cups, backpacks, and duty-free bags scattered across the tile as the crowd convulsed in blind survival. A toddler wailed. Someone yelled gun. Someone else kept yelling it. The overhead departures board flickered through the concussion like nothing had happened at all. But at the center of it, the struggle had narrowed into mechanics. Vale trapped the man's forearm against his own body and slammed the attacker sideways into the gate podium, hard enough to rattle the scanner loose. The weapon was out now. A compact black pistol, jammed half between bodies and half between intentions. The shooter tried to wrench it free and bring it up. Vale drove his forehead into the man's cheekbone with a sick, blunt crack and used the half-second of disorientation to hammer the gun hand into the edge of the podium. Bone gave. The pistol dropped. It hit the tile, skidded once beneath a row of molded chairs, and vanished under a spill of luggage and legs. The male escort made no sound of pain. His mouth opened on a hard exhale and shut again. He twisted with brutal strength, turning the collision into a grapple, trying to take Vale's balance and create enough room to recover, strike, or run. Megan saw all of it only in fragments because the moment the gun went off, the woman in the camel coat abandoned the last scrap of performance and went for the boy. No scream, no shock, no mother's cry, just speed. The leather tote swung forward, already open. Her hand disappeared inside and came back holding a slim stainless steel injector with a capped needle glinting under the fluorescent light. Megan did not think. She dropped Vale's book and hit the woman at full stride. The impact drove both of them into the side rail of the gurney. Metal shrieked against tile. One wheel buckled, then the entire frame tipped. The boy rolled with it in a tangle of navy blanket, oxygen tubing, and straps that had been arranged to look medical from a distance and now revealed themselves for what they were. Loose theater held together by speed and nerves. He struck the floor shoulder first. The sound that came out of him was barely human, a breath trapped under sedation and pain. The injector flew from the woman's hand, bounced once, spun under the gate bench, and disappeared. The woman clawed for Megan's face. Her nails raked across Megan's cheek, hot and sharp, but Megan had already gotten both hands on her. One on the wrist, one buried in the collar of the camel coat. They crashed to the ground together, sliding through scattered boarding slips and broken scanner plastic. The woman was stronger than she looked. Not gym strength, mean strength. Desperate, economical, vicious. She drove a knee toward Megan's ribs and twisted for the hair at her temple. Megan shoved the wrist down, pinned the forearm against the tile, and brought her weight across the elbow joint exactly the way she had controlled combative patients during overdoses and psych breaks when they were trying to rip out IV lines or bite staff. The woman hissed through her teeth and bucked hard. "You stupid bitch," she spat. Megan wrenched the arm higher until the shoulder started to give. "Stay down." The woman snarled and swung her free hand. Megan ducked the first strike and took the second across the jaw. White light burst behind her eyes. She tasted blood immediately copper and heat. She drove her forehead into the woman's cheek on instinct, not elegantly, not cleanly. Just enough to break rhythm, then slid her knee onto the attacker's biceps and crushed the arm to the floor. "Security!" Megan yelled, though she knew security had not yet arrived. "Get her hands clear, now." No one came. The terminal was still in collapse. Bodies pressed flat behind seat rows. A man in a Suns jersey was dragging a little girl by the hood of her sweatshirt behind a pillar. Benson had gone to one knee with both hands over his head. Lila crouched behind the podium in tears, staring at the blood on her scanner. Across the lane, Vale and the gunman hit the tile hard. The man had gotten one hand around Vale's jacket collar and was trying to roll through the fall, trying to turn his weight under and come up on top. He moved like someone who had worked short violence before. Not a street brawler, cleaner than that. Less waste. He chopped an elbow toward Vale's throat, missed by inches, and drove for the eyes instead. Vale caught the wrist twisted and folded the man's arm back so sharply that the shoulder joint popped loud enough for Megan to hear it over the screaming. Then the old Marine brought one knee down into the attacker's ribs and flattened him chest first against the floor. "Hands out," Vale barked. The man thrashed once and managed to get a boot under him. Vale hammered a forearm across the back of the neck, rode the motion, and pinned him again. "Hands out." The attacker spat blood across the tile and reached with his good arm toward his ankle. Secondary weapon, Megan thought. Vale thought it too. He shifted his grip, drove a palm strike into the side of the head, and the man's reaching hand went slack. Vale seized the wrist, yanked it behind the back, and planted a knee between the shoulder blades with enough pressure to make the man groan for the first time. "Do not move," Vale said, and there was nothing humanly uncertain in the order. The woman under Megan stopped fighting all at once, not because she had surrendered, because she had heard the change in her partner. She went still beneath Megan's weight, breathing hard, her blonde hair half torn loose across one eye, and then slowly turned her face toward the gurney. Megan followed the look. The boy was on his back on the tile. The oxygen mask had twisted sideways. One strap had snapped. The blanket had fallen open around his torso. He wore a gray hooded sweatshirt and jeans, both damp with sweat and wrinkled in the way clothes got after being worn too long under sedation and restraint. His chest rose shallowly. Stopped. Rose again, weaker. His lips, already pale, had deepened toward the blue. He was not seizing. He was not sleeping. He was disappearing by degrees. Megan shoved the woman's face back to the floor and looked up sharply. "Someone take her." This time, two men moved, finally jarred into action by command more than courage. The older veteran in the cap and the man in the Suns jersey rushed in together, uncertain but committed. Megan shifted just enough for them to grab the woman's arms, then rose and sprinted to the boy. She dropped to both knees beside him and stripped the crooked mask away. The smell hit first. Not oxygen. Not hospital. The faint, sweet chemical taint of plastic sweat and narcotics trapped in stale, exhaled air. His pupils were pinpoint. His breathing had slowed to a dangerous, uneven crawl. Megan went to work with the absolute focus of an old profession, snapping fully awake. "Hey," she said, one hand at his jaw, the other checking the pulse at his neck. "Stay with me." Thready pulse. Slow. Too slow. She swept the airway. No obstruction. Tongue slack but not fully occluding. Skin cool with that clammy sheen she had seen 100 times in overdose corridors and ambulance bays. There were adhesive marks high inside one elbow, another at the neck under the jawline partially hidden by hair. Repeated dosing. Not a single event. The sweatshirt sleeve had ridden back during the fall. His left wrist was bare now, not just bruised. Deep, parallel grooves, crossed with angry red abrasions where something heavy and tight had cut into the skin long enough to break surface. Fresh marks over older healing ones. Not one restraint, more than one. Megan sucked in a breath through her teeth. "You see him now," she said aloud, not to the boy. Not to herself, but to every frozen person still trying to decide whether this was real. No one answered. A voice on the floor behind her did. Medic. Val, still on top of the gunman, still in control, breathing harder now, but steady. Megan looked up. "Bag," he said. It took her half a second to understand. The leather tote. The woman's bag. She lunged for it, yanked the strap free from where it had twisted under the bench, and dumped the contents across the tile. Wallet. Passport wallet. Compact. Lipstick. Pack of tissues. 2 capped syringes and sterile sleeves, 1 uncapped injector case, a small amber vial without a pharmacy label, alcohol wipes, zip ties, 3 folded sets of paperwork secured with binder clips, a burner phone. The crowd made a sound then, low in collective revulsion, finally outrunning confusion. Megan snatched the amber vial, held it to the light, then tossed it aside before her fingers could start shaking. No label. No dosage. No excuse. "Call 911, she snapped at nobody and everybody. "Tell them opioid overdose with gunfire and multiple suspects. Tell them we need medics now." I already did. It was Lila, her face ghost white as she crawled out from behind the podium phone, pressed to one ear. "They're coming. They're coming." Megan nodded once and turned back to the boy. His respirations had dropped again. 4 seconds between breaths. Then 5. Too long. She thrust 2 fingers under his chin and lifted the jaw, opening the airway. "Come on, come on." His chest barely moved. No time to be gentle. She tilted his head, sealed her mouth over his, and gave him a measured rescue breath. Then another. His chest rose weakly. Better than nothing, not enough. "You with me?" she said, though he could not answer. "You do not get to leave in a bus station." Behind her, the gunman let out a ragged curse and tried to buck Vale off one more time. Vale answered by wrenching the captured arm half an inch higher. The man screamed. It cut through the terminal sharp and ugly. Then came the first real authority that mattered, boots pounding over tile from the East Corridor Transit Police shouting before they reached the lane. "Drop your hands. Everybody down. Everybody down." 3 officers in dark uniforms swept into view with pistols up, eyes wide and jumpy from too little information and too much adrenaline. Laser dots jittered across seatback's glass, the podium, Vale's shoulder. Megan felt the danger pivot instantly. A room this loud, this frightened, this broken open could go catastrophically wrong in a heartbeat. Wrong target. Wrong movement. Another shot. Vale knew it too. He kept his knee where it was pinned the suspect flat and raised his empty left hand slowly without lifting his weight. "Weapon under the chair bank to your right," he said in a voice that cut through panic like steel through canvas. Female accomplice disarmed. Teen male victim in respiratory depression. Get medical in here now. One of the transit officers flicked his gaze toward the row of chairs and saw the pistol half visible beside a rolling suitcase. His focus sharpened. Another officer took in the zip ties scattered from the tote, the syringes, the woman being held face down by 2 civilians, the boy on the floor turning blue under Megan's hands. The room rearranged itself inside their heads. "Secure them," the lead officer barked. 2 officers moved for the suspects. The third holstered and dropped to a knee beside Megan. "You medical." "ER nurse," she said, without looking up. "Former flight medic." "What do you need?" "Naloxone if you have it. Bag valve if your trauma kit is worth anything. And get me a pulse ox that actually works." He was already ripping a compact trauma pouch from his vest. "Nasal Narcan. Give it." He passed over the twin spray device with shaking fingers. Megan tore the package open with her teeth, braced the boy's head, and drove the nozzle into one nostril. "Depress plunger. Full dose. Time," she said. 9:29. She tossed the empty device aside and went back to the airway, 2 more rescue breaths, checking for response. Nothing immediate. His pulse remained slow under her fingers. "Second dose ready," the officer said. "Not yet. Let it hit." She stripped open the sweatshirt farther, searching for rise and fall. The boy's sternum showed beneath the undershirt, each breath too small, each pause too long. On his right forearm, just below the elbow crease, she found another bruise ringed around a puncture site. Repeated access. Repeated drugging. Jesus, the officer muttered. Megan ignored him. The floor around her had become a trauma bay in miniature, all unnecessary sound fading until only the essentials remained. Airway, pulse, color, time. The woman was in flex cuffs now, face pressed sideways to the tile, one cheek reddening under fluorescent glare. She was no longer screaming. She watched Megan with an expression so flat it almost chilled more than the violence had. Not fear, not regret. Fury at an interrupted task. The gunman had been hauled upright by two officers. One of his arms hung wrong. Blood ran from his split lip onto the collar of his dress shirt. Even restrained, he carried himself with a controlled stillness that made Megan's skin crawl. His eyes found the boy on the floor and stayed there for a long second. No concern in them, only loss. "Get him out of my sight," Megan said. The lead officer heard the edge in her voice and moved the man toward the far wall without argument. Vale rose at last, slowly keeping his hands visible until the transit officers waved him clear. Up close, he looked older than he had 5 minutes earlier, and somehow more dangerous too. A scrape had opened along his temple, and blood tracked in a thin line toward his jaw. His field jacket hung twisted from the fight. His breathing stayed measured. He crouched near Megan, but did not crowd the space. How is he? Still sinking. Vale looked at the boy. The marks on the wrists, the punctures, the skin color. Something moved behind his face, then not shock exactly, but anger stripped down to mineral hardness. "Paramedics are 90 seconds out," one officer said into the air after listening to his radio. Megan checked the pulse again. Still there. Barely. 90 seconds is too long. The boy's eyelids fluttered under the narcotic drag. He made a tiny wet sound and turned his face weakly away from the overhead lights. Megan leaned close. "Can you hear me?" No answer. "Can you squeeze my hand?" Nothing at first. Then the faintest pressure against her fingers. Small, delayed, real. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "There you are," she said. "Stay there." The Narcan began to catch. It always came ugly. His body jerked once, then again. A ragged breath tore into him deeper than the others and rough enough to sound painful. His stomach clenched. His back arched off the floor. Megan rolled him hard to his side just as he vomited thin bile and chemical stink across the tile. She held his shoulder and kept his airway clear while the withdrawal wave hit. Tremors ran through him from jaw to knees. He gagged, coughed, sucked at air like a drowning person clawing back above water. "It's okay," Megan said, firm, low, relentless. "You're waking up. Breathe through it." He tried. The effort sounded like broken paper. 2 paramedics burst through the lane then with a jump bag, monitor case, and oxygen kit, faces flushed from the sprint. The older one took in the scene in a single sweeping glance and immediately knelt opposite Megan. "Who gave naloxone?" "I did." 929. Single nasal dose. Suspected opioid load. Multiple recent puncture sites. Respiratory depression before response. The paramedic nodded, already fitting a real mask over the boy's face while his partner clipped a live pulse ox to a finger at last. The screen came on. 76%. Heart rate 38. The younger paramedic swore under his breath. "Bag him," Megan said. The older paramedic handed over the mask and ambu bag without argument, reading competence in the cadence of her voice the same way she read it in his. Together they worked in a rhythm older than introductions. Seal. Squeeze. Watch chest rise. Count. Check pulse. Reassess color. The monitor crept. 78, 80, 81. Not safe, better. Vale stood a few feet back now, placing his body between the treatment space and the gathering crowd. He did it so naturally, half the terminal accepted him as part of the response structure without thinking to question why. Transit police pushed civilians farther out, shouting for people to stay back. Stay down. Move behind the pillars. Phones were everywhere now, blue-white screens rising above frightened faces. Somebody was crying near the food court. Somebody else was praying. Megan barely heard any of it. The boy's lashes lifted again. His eyes opened to slits. Brown, young, confused enough to be human again. "Hey," she said, one hand braced at his shoulder while the other sealed the mask. "Stay with me." His gaze drifted. Found her, lost her, found her again. A tear leaked from one eye and slid into his hair. The younger paramedic cut away the sweatshirt sleeve to place a blood pressure cuff, and something crackled from inside the cuff seam. A folded scrap of paper, damp with sweat, slipped free and stuck against the inside of the fabric. Megan saw it but did not reach for it yet, not while he was still fighting for air. "Another dose?" the younger paramedic asked. "Stand by," the older one said, watching the monitor. 84. Heart rate 46. The boy coughed into the mask, tried weakly to push it away. Megan caught his wrist gently before the tremor could rip the seal loose. "I know," she said. "I know. Keep it on." His lips moved. No sound came out. She leaned closer, bringing her ear almost to his mouth. This time there was a sound. One broken syllable. Then another. Not enough to make a word, but enough to prove he was still here. Megan looked once at the scrap of folded paper lying against the cut sleeve, then back at the boy's face. "Easy," she said, smoothing damp hair away from his temple with the back of her wrist because her gloved hand was wet with bile and sweat. "Just breathe." The paramedic at the monitor exhaled. 90. Not normal. Not terrible. Alive. Behind them, handcuffs clicked on the man who had called himself a father. The woman in the camel coat was lifted to her feet and marched toward the wall, one shoe missing, hair hanging loose, face blank and ruined. Vale stood in the middle of the shattered lane with blood on his temple and broken scanner plastic at his boots, watching until both suspects were fully secured. Then he looked down at Megan and the boy on the floor. The station lights hummed overhead. Sirens rose faintly outside at last. The air smelled of spent gunpowder, vomit, diesel, and fear. Megan reached for the folded scrap of paper with her free hand and held the mask in place with the other as the boy dragged in one more shaking breath. The scrap of paper was damp with sweat and folded into a square no bigger than a sugar packet. Megan pinched it open with careful fingers while keeping the mask sealed over the boy's face. The handwriting inside was cramped uneven and pressed so hard into the page it had nearly torn through. "My name is Noah Bennett. Please do not let them take me." For half a second, the noise around her disappeared. Not because the terminal had gone quiet. It had not. Radios were still hissing. People were still crying. Transit officers were still barking orders as they forced civilians back from the shattered lane. Sirens were climbing outside closer now, layering over the stale mechanical hum of the station. But the words on that paper cut through all of it. Noah Bennett. Not the name the woman had reached for. Not the family story built for the room. A real name hidden in cloth, folded by shaking hands, carried through a terminal by a boy too drugged to stand and too clear-minded not to leave a trail. Megan looked at him. His eyes were barely open. His lashes trembled with the aftershock of naloxone and whatever else had been pumped through him. The real oxygen mask fogged faintly with each breath now. Not enough, better than before. She leaned close to his ear. "Noah, I heard you. You're safe." His gaze shifted toward her voice. It did not fully land, but it moved. The older paramedic glanced at the note in her hand while keeping one eye on the monitor. "That him?" "Yes." "You know him?" "No." Megan refolded the paper once and slid it into her breast pocket. "But he knows he's not who they said." The younger paramedic had cut the other sleeve away now. More bruising surfaced along the forearm and biceps. Not random impact marks. Grips, restraint, injection sites. One dark fingerprint-shaped bruise sat just above the elbow where someone had likely controlled the arm during dosing. He muttered something under his breath that sounded like prayer or disgust. The monitor climbed another point. 92. Heart rate 51. The older paramedic let out the first breath that sounded almost normal. I want a line in him and a gurney under him. If he crashes again, we do not work him on a bus station floor. Already opening the kit, his partner said. Megan looked up as fresh boots thundered across the tile. Not transit police this time. These moved with more discipline and less noise. Dark, tactical uniforms. Marked vests. Weapons held low but ready. A woman at the front with sharp cheekbones, black hair pulled into a severe knot, and the kind of expression that suggested she had spent 20 years seeing the worst versions of ambition. FBI. Her credentials flashed only once before she tucked them back. Who is in charge here? Nobody answered immediately. For a strange second, the entire broken gate seemed to look toward Thomas Vale. He had cleaned none of the blood from his temple. It had dried in a dark track down the side of his face. His jacket still hung twisted from the fight. He stood near the suspects with the patient area in his peripheral vision alert without intruding. When the woman from the bureau arrived, his eyes met hers and held just long enough for recognition to pass. Not personal, professional. Your suspects are secure, Vale said. Male drew a weapon. Female produced injectable narcotics. Victim is a sedated minor alive recovering airway. Fraudulent medical cover. The woman took that in without visible reaction. Then her gaze moved to Megan, kneeling beside Noah, and to the cut sleeves, the bruises, the real oxygen setup, the torn blanket, the fake transport bag split open on the floor. Agent Elena Ruiz, she said. Violent Crimes Task Force. Her voice carried the flat precision of someone who had long ago stopped wasting emotion on introductions. Megan nodded once. Megan Cross, ER nurse, I found him. Ruiz's eyes dropped to the note in Megan's pocket, then back to her face. You have identification. Sort of. Megan pulled the folded page free and handed it over. Ruiz opened it. Read the name once. Read it again. Something in her face tightened so quickly that it might have gone unnoticed by anyone not already running on emergency focus. You're sure this came from him? It fell from inside his sleeve. Ruiz did not answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the paper as if it were heavier than its own weight. Then she looked toward the suspect at the wall, the man in the windbreaker now cuffed with one arm hanging badly, blood drying along his mouth. Bennett, she said quietly. Vale heard it at once. That name means something. Ruiz folded the note with exact care. It means this just changed shape. The lead transit officer stepped in. Agent, we have 2 in custody and 1 firearm recovered from under the seating bank. Our scene is blown wide open and the station is on partial lockdown. Ruiz barely glanced at him. Keep it that way. Then to Megan, can he speak? Barely. Ruiz crouched opposite her, close enough for Noah to see if he focused. Noah. Her tone softened by only a degree. Can you hear me? His eyes dragged toward the new voice. She held the note where he could see it. Did you write this? A small pause. Then the faintest movement of his chin. Yes. Ruiz inhaled once through her nose. Listen to me carefully. My name is Agent Ruiz. You are not with them anymore. You are with us. She watched him struggle to hold on. Do you know your mother's first name? His lips moved under the mask. Megan leaned closer and lifted one side just enough for air to pass without losing the seal completely. The answer came as a dry scrape. Laura. Ruiz closed her eyes for half a heartbeat. When she opened them again, all softness was gone. She stood and signaled one of her agents over with 2 fingers. Call Washington Field. Wake Cybercrimes and Protective Operations. Tell them I need immediate confirmation on Assistant United States Attorney Laura Bennett and any active threats tied to her current caseload. The agent was already moving. Megan looked up sharply. His mother is a prosecutor. Ruiz nodded once. Federal cyber. High-level financial crime and procurement laundering. If this is her son, nobody was moving him for resale. The meaning hit cold and clean. Not random trafficking. Pressure. Leverage. Noah's hand twitched weakly atop the blanket. Megan, covered it with hers before the tremor turned into panic. His skin was clammy and cool. The younger paramedic slid an IV catheter into a vein at last and secured it down. The older one checked the blood pressure, frowned, then adjusted the cuff and checked again. Still soft, he muttered. Not crashing. Not pretty either. Get him onto the stretcher, Megan said. On 3, the paramedic answered. They rolled him with practiced care, keeping the oxygen mask in place, tubing clear line secure. The moment they lifted a heavy object, shifted inside the waistband of the boy's jeans, and hit the floor with a metallic clink. Every head nearby turned. Transit police moved first, hands dropping toward holsters. Megan looked down. Not a weapon, a key. Plain, metal old style with a chipped red plastic tag on a ring. Ruiz bent and picked it up with a gloved hand. Stamped into the tag in faded white block letters were 2 words. Red Hanger. The station seemed to constrict around the tiny object. Ruiz held it up. Where did this come from? Noah's eyes fluttered. His breathing rasped against the mask. He stared at the key as if it were both foreign and terrifyingly familiar. Pocket, Megan said, or they missed it. The older paramedic shook his head. Not if they stripped and redressed him for transport. That was hidden. Ruiz looked at Noah again. Did you hide this? A pause, then the smallest nod. Megan felt the pulse in his wrist jump under her fingers. Brave kid, she thought, and the thought hurt. Ruiz turned, already speaking. Get me Tucson Field Office and State Police Aviation. Pull every private landing strip, service yard, and industrial lease outside city limits with a red hangar designation or color marking. Cross-reference shell companies linked to medical transport coach service subcontractors and defense procurement subcontractors. The agent on the phone pivoted away, relaying it word for word. Vale stepped nearer, close enough now that the bureau agents registered him fully. One of them did a fast double take at the face, then at Ruiz, waiting for cue. Ruiz gave none. You know the suspects yet? Vale asked. Not by truth, she said. Only by cover. Transit police brought over the clear evidence bag containing the false documents recovered from the tote and the fallen wallet. Ruiz took them and flipped through the packets with quick, hard efficiency. Medical waivers, transport authorizations, guardianship letters, route accommodations. Not cheap work, not home-printed fraud. These are good, she said. Too good, Megan replied. Ruiz looked at her. The security officer cleared them because the packet looked official, Megan said. No hesitation. The gate attendant almost moved them through even after the oxygen issue because she had papers in hand. Ruiz slid one document free and tilted it under the light. Embedded seal. Correct formatting. Federal routing marks. Either somebody had access to templates and issuance chains or somebody inside the chain approved the cover. Vale's mouth hardened inside. Ruiz said nothing, which was answer enough. An FBI medic arrived with a larger trauma bag and knelt beside the paramedics. Ambulance is backing to the east entrance now. We can move as soon as he tolerates transport. Megan checked Noah again. His eyes were open slightly wider this time, still dull with chemicals and nausea, but tracking more consistently. He looked past her shoulder toward the suspects at the wall. She shifted her body to block the line of sight. No, she said gently. Look at me. His gaze came back with effort. Do you know where they were taking you? His throat worked. Ruiz crouched again, close but not looming. Noah, I need whatever you can give me. His lips formed the first sound and lost it. He swallowed, grimaced, tried again. Air. The word cracked apart. Airfield, Megan guessed. His eyes fluttered once. Ruiz held up the red tag. This. He stared at it and made a faint sound of agreement. Where? He was shaking now, partly from drug reversal, partly from fear returning in full. Megan kept one hand on his shoulder and another around the oxygen tubing to steady both. Red, he whispered. Ruiz leaned nearer. Red hangar. He nodded weakly. Location. His face tightened with the effort to retrieve memory through sedation. Sweat beaded again at his temple. Tucson. The word came out slurred but clear enough. Ruiz rose in a single smooth motion. Go, she snapped to no one person and all of them. Alert Tucson, I want the strip locked before anyone starts engines. Her team moved. Phones up. Radios alive. Orders crossing each other in disciplined streams. One agent pulled up aerial maps on a tablet within seconds. Another was already listing industrial parks near private runways. A third started with the shell company angle Ruiz had mentioned and fed names into a secure database. The air around them changed from reactive chaos to investigative momentum so quickly it felt almost like a second storm rolling through the first. Transit police watched with a mixture of relief and unease, their local authority shrinking in the face of federal velocity. At the far wall, the woman in the camel coat finally spoke again. You have no idea what you're touching. Her voice carried farther now that the crowd had quieted into shocked murmurs. Ruiz turned her head slowly. The woman smiled, blood on one tooth where Megan had driven her face into the tile. This doesn't end with us. One of the agents started toward her. Ruiz lifted a hand and stopped him. Good, Ruiz said. Then you can save us time. The woman's smile faded. The man beside her had said nothing since being cuffed. He stood with his back to the glass, one shoulder lower than the other from the fight eyes hooded and cold. When Ruiz approached, his gaze moved over her suit, the bureau vest under it, the badge clipped hard at her waist and settled on her face. You should get counsel, she said. He laughed once through split lips. You think counsel matters tonight. It matters less every second you stay silent. He glanced toward Noah. Megan stepped instinctively in front of the stretcher before she even knew she had moved. The man noticed. Something almost amused flickered in his expression. He was never the product. Ruiz's eyes sharpened. I know. Then you know there are calls already in motion that you can't stop. Val came to Ruiz's side without hurry. The suspect's attention shifted to him, and the amusement vanished entirely. You had your window, Vale said. The man's jaw worked. You should have stayed in retirement. Vale's reply came flat. You should have stayed away from children. No one in earshot breathed for a second. Then the FBI medic broke the spell by calling out from the stretcher. Pressure is holding. He's transportable now. Megan looked down. Noah's fingers had latched weakly onto the edge of her sleeve. Not by accident. She leaned in. I'm coming with you to the door. The panic in his eyes eased by a fraction. Ruiz saw it. Do that. The stretcher rolled wheels, bumping over shattered scanner plastic and discarded documents. Transit police cleared a narrow path through the station. Civilians pressed back, some crying, some filming, some staring at the raw marks on Noah's wrists, now fully visible beneath the blanket. Those marks told the truth faster than any statement could. Leela Ortiz stood off to one side, still pale, holding the dropped clipboard against her chest like a shield. As Megan guided the stretcher past Lila, looked at Noah, then at the wounds, then at Megan. I almost boarded him, she said, voice breaking. Megan stopped just long enough to meet her eyes. You didn't, Lila swallowed hard. Because of you. Megan almost told her it had not felt like enough soon enough, but the words would have been for her, not for the woman shaking in front of her. So she only nodded once and kept moving. The east doors had been thrown wide. Red and blue lights washed the station wall in hard pulses. Night air hit Megan's face, cool and dry and sharp with dust. The ambulance crouched against the curb with rear doors open. Another black SUV had just arrived behind it, then another federal plates flashing under the strobes. As they loaded, Noah Ruiz stepped out beside the gurney. Hospital destination. St. Joseph's, the older paramedic said. Closest trauma with pediatric consult and secure wing. Ruiz nodded to the FBI medic. You ride with him, protective detail at intake and outside the room. Then, to Megan, did he say anything else before we got here? Just enough to confirm the note and the key. He was too suppressed. Stay available. Megan gave a tired, humorless breath. I wasn't planning to disappear. Ruiz almost smiled, almost good. From inside the ambulance, Noah made a small sound. Megan looked in. He was looking for her again through the oxygen mask and the straps being laid across his chest. She stepped up to the doors. I'm right here. His lips moved. She leaned close. This time the words were clearer, though still dragged through pain and exhaustion. "Mom." The single word nearly split something in her. "She'll know," Megan said. "They'll find her before anybody gets near her." His fingers loosened from the blanket, then caught again on her sleeve for one last second before the medic gently disentangled them. The doors shut. The siren rose. The ambulance pulled away into Phoenix night. For a moment, Megan stood in the wash of taillights and dust, cheek stinging where she had been scratched, jaw throbbing where she had been hit, hands still smelling like bile, latex, and adrenaline. Then she turned back toward the terminal. The work was not done there. Inside, the station looked less like a transit hub now and more like the shell of an incident. Broken glass taped off in widening circles. Evidence markers appearing on the tile where the pistol, the syringes, and the fake paperwork had fallen. Federal agents moving with tablets and cameras. Transit officials being separated for statements. The crowd thinning as witnesses were identified, interviewed, or released. One FBI agent intercepted Ruiz at the threshold, breathless from speed. Tucson confirmed a private strip under lease to a medical logistics shell. One building painted red on the eastern service lane. Ruiz's entire face sharpened. Aircraft status. Possible prep activity on one prop jet. Ground units are converging. Lock state air corridors around it. Already requested. Vale had come up behind them silently enough that the young agent started when he realized the older man was there. Ruiz did not. Whoever built the documents expected the handoff to be seamless, Vale said. That means timing mattered. Ruiz nodded. If they missed their route window here, the receiving side may already know. The agent added cyber is tracing the shell now. Early ties to a subcontractor under sealed review in Bennett's casework. Megan looked from one face to another. So, this was leverage. Ruiz turned to her fully. Assistant United States Attorney Laura Bennett has been building a federal money laundering and procurement corruption case for almost a year. If somebody wanted her to miss filings, alter testimony, or compromise evidence, taking her son would move the pressure faster than threatening her directly. Megan felt suddenly cold, despite the heat still trapped in the station walls. And they brought him through a bus terminal. "Because nobody sees what they do not expect to exist in public," Ruiz said. Noah's note felt heavier in Megan's pocket, even though she had already handed it over in substance, if not in paper. The image of him folding it with drugged hands under a blanket in transit hit her hard and late. Ruiz's phone buzzed. She answered instantly. Listened for 3 seconds, then said, "Do not wait. Go through the door." She ended the call and looked at Vale. "They're moving on the strip now." One of the bureau agents approached with a fresh evidence bag. Inside lay the recovered document packet, the burner phone, and the red-tagged key. Ruiz took the bag and passed the key side briefly toward Megan so she could see it once more. Not because proof was needed, because details mattered. Red hanger. Plain, ugly, real. Ruiz lowered the bag. "I need formal statements from both of you." Megan nodded. Vale said, "You'll get them." Ruiz's gaze shifted between the blood on his temple and the scratches on Megan's face, then back toward the lane where Noah had nearly vanished into routine paperwork and fluorescent light. Tonight, she said routine almost won. No one answered that. There was too much broken glass underfoot for easy words. A transit officer came over to ask where to log the recovered bag from the woman's tote. Another needed confirmation on who had first observed the shut oxygen valve. Lila Ortiz was being guided toward a chair with bottled water, and a blanket she kept refusing because too many people were finally trying to comfort the one they had nearly ignored. Benson was on the phone, with Central Administration voice shaking as he explained how a standard boarding lane had become a federal crime scene. Megan wiped at the drying blood near her mouth with the back of her wrist and looked once toward the dark doors where the ambulance had vanished. Ruiz followed the look. "He made it out breathing," she said. Megan swallowed. "That's not the same as safe." Ruiz tucked the evidence bag under one arm. No. The answers stayed there between them, hard and unfinished, while radios crackled and federal agents fanned through the wreckage searching for every piece of the machine that had almost carried Noah Bennett out of sight. Searching for every piece of the machine that had almost carried Noah Bennett out of sight took the rest of the night. Megan gave her statement in a windowless interview room that smelled faintly of copier toner, old coffee, and dust burned off by overworked air conditioning. An FBI recorder sat between her and Agent Ruiz, its red light steady and indifferent. A legal pad filled under Ruiz's hand in quick, narrow strokes, while Megan walked the story from the first false silhouette of the gurney to the dead pulse ox, the shut oxygen valve, the marks on Noah's wrist, the note in his sleeve, the key with the red tag. She did not realize how much she had been holding inside her body until the telling forced sequence onto chaos. Once the facts lined up, the fear arrived late. It came in small things first. Her hands started shaking when she reached for the paper cup of water Ruiz had placed beside her. Her jaw ached where the woman in the camel coat had hit her. The scratch down her cheek had tightened into a burning line. Her ribs hurt when she inhaled deeply. Every time she blinked, she saw the gun hand entering the jacket again, saw the muzzle trying to rise between civilian bodies, saw Noah's chest failing to lift on the tile. Ruiz saw it too, though she said nothing for several minutes. She simply let the recorder run and Megan's voice finish its work. When the account was done, Ruiz switched the recorder off and closed the legal pad. "You made the right call at every bad branch," she said. Megan stared at the cooling water in the paper cup. "I almost confronted them alone. But you didn't. I went to security and lost time. You created a record." Ruiz leaned back in the chair. "That matters." Megan gave a tired, scraped laugh that held no humor at all. Not to the kid on the floor. Ruiz's expression did not soften, but it shifted. "No, to the people who built the road. They hide inside handoffs, Miss Cross. Security to transit, transit to transport, public to private. If this goes where I think it goes, every point in that chain becomes evidence." Megan rubbed a thumb along the seam of the paper cup. "How far does it go?" Ruiz looked toward the one-way glass for a second, thinking, then back at Megan. "Far enough that they believed they could move the son of a federal prosecutor through a public terminal using authentic-looking federal support documents and a compromised transport corridor." She paused. "Far enough that someone in Washington may already be having the worst night of his career." Megan lifted her eyes. "You found the source. We found the beginning of one." That was all Ruiz would say. Vale gave his statement 2 rooms down. Megan saw him only once during the next hour, passing the doorway with a fresh bandage at his temple and a disposable cup of black coffee in one hand. Even at 3 in the morning, even with blood scrubbed from his face and evidence dust still clinging to one knee of his slacks, he carried himself with the same disciplined stillness he had worn beneath the departure board. He glanced through the narrow wired glass, saw her inside, and gave a small nod before moving on. The nod steadied her more than it should have. By the time the interviews ended, the city outside had thinned into the strange, hollow quiet that belonged only to the darkest slice of night. The station had been partially reopened under heavy police presence. Witnesses were gone. The shattered ad panel had been boarded over with cheap plywood that did nothing to disguise how violently the place had been interrupted. The lane at Gate 12 still glowed under portable scene lights while technicians in gloves photographed every inch of tile. Ruiz found Megan near the east doors where she had finally sat down on a plastic bench and discovered that exhaustion could go beyond fatigue into something almost chemical. "They took him to St. Joseph's," Ruiz said. Megan looked up too fast. "He made transport. He made it." Ruiz handed over a folded visitor pass. "He is in a monitored room under protection." He asked for the nurse from the terminal when they got him lucid enough to answer questions. Something in Megan's chest tightened and eased at the same time. "He's asking for his mother, too," Ruiz continued. "She's already airborne back from D.C. Protective detail met her at the gate. Megan closed her fingers around the visitor pass. Ruiz watched her for a moment. "Go home first if you need to." Megan stood. Ruiz almost smiled. "That's what I thought. Outside, the pre-dawn air over Phoenix had cooled enough to make the bruises in Megan's body announce themselves with fresh precision. Her car was still in the garage 2 blocks over, but she never made it that far. One of the Bureau SUVs took her to the hospital instead, with no conversation beyond destination and seatbelt. The city slid by in sodium gold and black glass. Empty intersections. Delivery trucks. A woman jogging under street lamps with earbuds in and no idea how close hours earlier another life had come to disappearing through her city without a trace. Megan leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes. The movement of the vehicle woke old muscle memory. Years of riding medevac transports had taught her to sleep in fragments to come awake between gear shifts and radio checks and pressure changes. But no sleep came now. Only images. The dead monitor. The fake mother's face as she reached for the injector. The note. "My name is Noah Bennett. Please do not let them take me." By the time they reached St. Joseph's, dawn had begun to dilute the horizon behind the eastern buildings. The hospital lobby held the strange calm of places that never closed and never fully woke because they were always already awake. Night shift faces past morning shift faces in elevators and corridors with that hollow-eyed civility born from shared attrition. An FBI medic met her at the security desk and walked her upstairs without introduction. Protective detail stood outside Noah's room in plain clothes that did not fool anyone with ye eyes. One man by the window pretended to read a chart mounted upside down. Another woman sat 2 chairs down from the door with an earpiece wire barely visible against her neck. The room itself was dim except for a warm wash of early sun at the blinds and the soft green pulse of monitors. Noah Bennett looked smaller in a hospital bed than he had on the station floor. The blanket tucked around him was white now, not navy. There were IV lines in place. Telemetry leads on his chest, a cannula under his nose, and the bruises at his wrists had been cleaned well enough to reveal their depth. His face had color again, but it was fragile color easily lost. The drugs had not fully released him yet. They left his movements slow, and his expression caught between adolescent alertness and stunned distance. He was awake. At the sound of the door, his eyes turned. For one long second he stared at her, as if still unsure whether she belonged to the part of the night that had been nightmare, or the part that had interrupted it. Then recognition surfaced. He lifted one hand barely. Megan crossed to the bed at once. "Hey," she said softly. His mouth twitched in something that was not quite a smile but tried to be. The skin around his eyes looked too old for 16. "You came." "Of course I came." His throat moved. He was still hoarse voice roughened by oxygen vomiting and chemicals. "Did they get them?" "Yes." Megan pulled the visitor chair closer and sat. "Both of them." He looked toward the window. "The man. He's in custody." Noah shut his eyes briefly and relief moved across his face like pain leaving a cramped muscle by degrees. When he opened them again, there was fear underneath it. "My mom. She's on her way." That did it. All the held-together effort in him wavered. His chin tightened. He looked down at the blanket, trying very hard not to become younger than he already was, trying not to break in front of a stranger. Megan knew that fight. She had seen it in kids after crashes, assaults, house fires, ICU wakes. The human need to hold shape 1 minute longer, even when the body had already started to shake itself apart. She did not speak into it immediately. She only reached over and placed her hand lightly over his. "I thought he said, then stopped." His fingers flexed once under hers. "I know." He swallowed. "I thought nobody could tell." Megan looked at the monitor, then back at him. "You made it hard not to." The faintest crease formed between his brows. The note. And the key. That brought a ghost of surprise to his face. They didn't find it. Number. He breathed out slowly through his nose. "I put it in the seam of my pocket lining. It hurt to get it in there." Megan imagined drugged fingers working blindly in darkness, while 2 adults played parents in public spaces, and nearly had to look away. "Smart," she said. Noah watched her for a second, with the exhausted seriousness of a boy who had needed to become strategic long before he should have. I thought if I could leave one true thing, somebody might know I wasn't theirs. The room stayed still around that sentence. Megan tightened her hand over his once. Somebody knew. He looked at her cheek, then at the thin red line where the woman had scratched her. She did that. So did the floor. A tiny breath that might have been a laugh escaped him. It hurt him to do it, but Megan was glad to see pain rooted in something ordinary. The door opened quietly behind her. Noah looked up, and the world narrowed to one point. Laura. Bennett entered the room in the same dark suit she had worn from Washington. The jacket wrinkled now, blouse collar, slightly crooked hair pulled back with hands that had plainly not been steady when she did it. She was in her mid-40s, elegant in the severe way federal power often was, but every line of control in her had been split open by the flight west. Her face was drained of color. Her eyes had not slept. When she saw her son in the bed alive and looking back at her, the composure went out of her like the bottom had dropped from under it. Noah. His breath hitched. Mom. She crossed the room so fast the protective agent at the door half moved and then thought better of it. Laura reached the bed, gathered his face in both hands with terrifying gentleness, and bent over him as if trying to memorize proof with skin before anybody could tell her it was gone. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God." Noah's control broke at the sound of her voice. Tears came without drama, simply because the body had found the one thing it could finally stop surviving for. Laura climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed and folded around him as much as the IV lines and monitor leads allowed. He buried his face against her shoulder like he had permission again to be exactly his age. Megan looked away, not out of awkwardness, but respect. Some reunions were too raw to witness head-on. She was rising quietly from the chair when Laura turned, still holding Noah's hand, and saw her fully for the first time. Their eyes met. Ruiz must have briefed her, or maybe no briefing would have been necessary. The scratches, the bruised jaw, the dried exhaustion in Megan's face would have told enough. Laura stood. For a moment, she seemed unable to find language large enough to stand under what she wanted to say. Then she crossed the room and took Megan by both forearms, holding on hard as if gratitude itself required contact. "They told me what you did." Megan opened her mouth, but Laura shook her head once, tears running freely now. "They told me you saw him." Her voice fractured. "They told me you did not let them move him." Megan swallowed against the sudden burn at the back of her throat. "He helped. He left a note." Laura laughed through tears at that, a shattered sound. "That is my son." Noah, from the bed, managed a week. "I got the handwriting from you." Laura turned back to him with a sobbing smile and touched his hair. The room door opened again. Thomas Vale stepped in wearing a dark suit now, though the day had not really had time yet for such transformations. Someone had found him a fresh shirt. The cut at his temple had been cleaned and closed with butterfly strips. Without the field jacket and blood, he looked more recognizably like the man once photographed for committee hearings and command briefings. But in the quiet of the room, with hospital light across one side of his face, he seemed less like a public figure than a tired, older soldier, making sure the right people had come home. Laura Bennett knew who he was immediately. The recognition passed through grief and professional instinct together. She released Megan's arms and crossed to him with her hand half extended. "General Vale." He took her hand gently. "Laura." The use of her first name held the faint echo of networks far above Megan's world, the kind in which people knew one another by case files, hearings, classified memos, and bad news delivered at all hours. Yet nothing formal lasted in Laura's face. She looked at him, then at the cut on his temple, and whatever composure she had rebuilt in the last 30 seconds cracked again. "They said you stopped him from drawing." Vale's gaze flicked once toward Noah and then back to her. "Your son did more than he should have had to." Laura followed the glance to the bed, saw the cleaned restraint wounds at Noah's wrists, and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the prosecutor was back in her, not replacing the mother, but standing beside her. "Ruiz told me Tucson got there in time." Vale nodded. Before wheels up, Megan turned. What did they find? Vale looked at her. Perhaps he heard in the question not curiosity but the need to know that the machine had broken somewhere beyond one room, one kid, one night. 3 minors in a secondary holding area, he said. Alive, sedated. A pilot preparing a charter under false manifests. 2 support personnel in custody. Digital equipment forged route packets and enough transport materials to keep federal prosecutors busy for years. Laura gave a bleak breath. One of the shell companies ties back to a defense subcontracting channel my office had under seal. She looked at Noah as if the words themselves might bruise him if they reached too loudly. This was pressure. Noah stared at the blanket. He had likely guessed some version of that already. Smart kids often did. The damage came not from not knowing, but from having their private fears confirmed by adult mouths. Megan stepped back from the center of the room, giving the family and the old Marine more air. But Noah's eyes found her again. Wait. She paused. His hand moved weakly toward the bedside table. A clear evidence sleeve lay there beside a plastic cup of ice chips and a hospital TV remote. Inside the sleeve was the folded paper note, now flattened carefully by someone who understood that certain objects no longer belonged to evidence alone. Noah touched it with 2 fingers. "Can I have that back?" Laura looked at him. "If they're done with it." "They made a copy," he said. Ruiz's voice came from the doorway before anyone had seen her arrive. "They are done with it." She stepped inside holding a thin folder and a phone in the same hand, her expression as composed as ever, though something in her eyes had eased by half a degree. "No charges to update you with yet because no one has slept enough to count them properly," she said, "but the red hanger site is secure. Washington is awake and several people in federal offices are about to have very uncomfortable mornings." Laura accepted the folder, automatically prosecutor instinct even now. Ruiz came farther in and placed the evidence sleeve in Noah's lap. He stared at it for a long moment, then looked at Megan. "You keep it." She blinked. "Noah, I mean it." Laura's eyes moved between them, reading the shape of something that had happened on a bus station floor, which no official briefing could translate. Noah pushed the sleeve weakly toward her. "I thought if I disappeared, maybe nobody would know who I was. You made that not happen." Megan did not trust her voice immediately. The folded note in the clear sleeve looked pitifully small. Cheap paper, shaking letters. The most ordinary object in the room and somehow the heaviest. She took it with both hands. "I'll keep it safe," she said at last. Noah nodded and sank back against the pillows, suddenly exhausted by the effort of giving it away. Ruiz checked her phone, then looked to Vale. "I need a statement addendum on the male suspect." He finally asked for counsel after naming 2 logistics contacts. Vale inclined his head once. "In a minute." She glanced at Megan. "The station attendant from Gate 12 has already requested to amend her report. She wants it on record that you warned them before the weapon was drawn." Megan let out a long breath she had not realized she was holding. "Good," Ruiz said, and for the first time the words sounded almost warm. Then she stepped back into the hall to let other people work. Silence settled again, softer now. Hospital silence was never complete. Monitors still pulsed. Wheels still passed in distant corridors. Somewhere down the hall a man coughed behind a closed door. But inside Noah's room the violence of the night had receded enough to leave space for smaller, stranger things. Laura straightened the edge of the blanket. Vale stood near the blinds with his hands loosely clasped behind him. Megan lowered herself back into the chair with the evidence sleeve resting across her knees. Noah watched the sunlight inch across the floor. "I hate bus stations," he murmured. For the first time, everyone in the room laughed. Even Vale. It came out brief and rough and human. Laura bent and kissed Noah's forehead. "You are never taking one again." Noah turned his head slightly toward Megan. "Did you ever get your weekend off?" She looked at him, at the absurdity of the question rising from this bed after a night like that, and smiled despite herself. "No," she said. "Looks like I got something else." He considered that with solemn teenage seriousness, and then at last let his eyes drift shut. Not collapse. Not sedation forced by another hand. Sleep, the real kind, easing in because the room had become safe enough to allow it. Laura kept one hand on his wrist until his breathing found a calmer rhythm. Vale checked the watch at his cuff, then looked toward the door. I should go make somebody's morning considerably worse. Laura turned to him. Thank you felt too small in the air between them, but she said it anyway because there was nothing larger that could be trusted not to break. Vale inclined his head. Take care of your son. Then he looked at Megan. No salute, no speech. Just the same level gaze he had given her beneath the departure board before any of this had a shape. You saw the gap, he said quietly. Megan glanced down at the clear sleeve in her hands. So did he. Vale gave the faintest nod to that, then left the room. Sunlight climbed another inch. In the hall, Ruiz's voice carried low into a phone naming cities and agencies and people who would not sleep for a while. Inside the room, Laura Bennett sat with her son and watched him breathe. Megan remained in the chair a little longer than she needed to, the folded note resting light and impossible in her palms, while the first clean morning after the longest night she had worked in years spread slowly across the walls.